familiar with the wave of sightings that went on back then at that time period. The Ed Walters sightings primarily, and there were a lot of other people who had sightings as well, but you may be familiar with the Ed Walters sightings. But anyway, I grew up just living across the bay from him, so I could see his house from my house. And I remember, I think I was like 9 or something at the time, but Bud Hopkins had come to town and done a special on the local television public access station, and that started my fascination. I remember looking out my window, seeing the guy's house where aliens were supposedly visiting, and the photographs were taken, and that really kind of jump-started my interest in psychology. So I guess my interest in psychology was really more fueled by the UFOs than vice versa. And that was, 30 years ago, I guess now. So yeah, I started off just going to college in where I grew up in Pensacola, Florida, and eventually got into a graduate program at University of Georgia, and there focused a little bit on a little bit of everything, really: neuroscience, cognitive modeling, kind of threat assessment, stuff like that. And went on, became a professor, and since then been a perennial adjunct off and on for many years in private industry, and kind of moving back towards education again now. So, and consistently maintain my interest in the UFO topic the whole time too.
So you've done a lot of psychological and statistical work in industry.
Right. Last work I did was big pharma kind of stuff. Mainly I'd like to get back into the kind of professor roles in some, kind of where my heart is, going back to teaching. But it's sorry, I blanked on your question there.
No, that's okay. So are you currently attached to the Georgia Perimeter College? Or is that?
I'm not. I'm actually on the other side of the country. I'm in Arizona.
Okay.
So, I was working, like I say, for big pharma, and now I'm trying to transition back into teaching at the colleges here. Of course, enrollment numbers have yet to pick back up. So.
Yeah, exactly. I want to tell you that. So, look, I'm 67. I was kind of nearing. I could see the end of my career in sight, but when every single student left campus, I went, I don't know if this is going to be back to normal even in a year. And so I said, I just announced to everybody that I was retiring on May 8th, 2020, and I would become an adjunct. And I was not going to deal with managing 100 people and a bunch of students, none of whom were there. And I just retired. Now, I was with the Hume Center, and that's the largest research center at Virginia Tech. It's still growing rapidly. So and my timing for leaving was fantastic because it's exploding. It's really doing great. And I would have been miserable because I'd have had zero time doing research and would have been 100% managerial. So I understand your desire to do education and research. And when that was no longer going to be that for me, even a little bit, I decided to end it. So as a full professor where you have a research team, all you're doing is management, while you get to watch the students and the junior faculty have all the fun. So I decided I would stop and go back to doing other things, and that includes working on the science in and around UAPs, and then I'm in SCU with you. So it's really good. So tell me you did some interesting research into the psychological impact of kind of the strange. So you've done some of that work. Tell us about that to the extent you want to.
Sure. So by and large, what I've kind of, I've looked at the work that's been done in social sciences and then things like that related to UFOs specifically, and kind of the strange more generally. People will often experience changes related to, I guess you could say, personality, for lack of a better term, and after undergoing an experience. Typically, there are things that are described as being more environmentally conscious, being how how would you describe it? Almost more of a Zen-like philosophy or a Buddhistic philosophy, right? So these kinds of changes are not in every person that has something weird happen to them, but you do see it surprisingly often, right? So it becomes, and this doesn't necessarily even depend on how dramatic the encounter is. Sometimes you see people that have what we might think of as a non-dramatic encounter, but they have a dramatic reaction, right? And they come to realize things about themselves and their place in the universe and things like that. So that's my interest kind of specifically on these, if you want to use a kind of an old school term, psychic factors, right? And we say psychic meaning mental, not ESP.
So let me ask you a specific question. You and I both are from the South, and we understand how deeply religious large portions of the South are. And I have personally witnessed, but I'm just going to give you an anecdote. And I suspect that you've looked into this, given you've got some personality correlates you've studied. I've seen people who were deeply religious and very authoritarian just have their world turned upside down. And they had to go from having one view and absolute certainty to all of a sudden having a life filled with ambiguity, especially
right. And that's the key thing right there. I think you hit on it, the ambiguity issue. That there's even the construct of ambiguity tolerance, as we call it. Some people are more able to deal with not knowing a concrete answer, right? And some people just can't stand that. And that ties in exactly to kind of what you're talking about.
So yeah, I just really feel for these very authoritarian, very religious, very, very focused on their religion, their entire lives dominated by their religion, suddenly faced with, I do not know what universe I'm in, and so they're just overwhelmed. Have you done some statistical work that we can point to or look up, or are you aware of some that we should study to understand this?
Most of the stuff that was done in this realm was done in the 80s by just a handful of people Berthold Schwartz and a few people like that. There's some good work, but there's not a lot of. There should have been more. I think there needs to be more kind of personality measures on a larger scale. That's one of the things that I'd like to see SCU eventually try to do, along with witness interviews and witness inventories. Maybe include questions about how did this impact you, right? What were the effects on you as a person related to this event, not necessarily what the object itself was, right? That would, I think, be the way to go. I don't think it hasn't been done yet, to my knowledge. I mean, I think there have been some small studies of 15 or 20 people, things like that, but I'd like to see it on a larger scale.
So you and I both are fully aware of how academics and research works. Where do we go for funding?
Oh. Well, it now with the recent news and interest on the UFO UAP topic, I think maybe there could be something there that might develop. It's difficult because, and this is something that I saw Mick West, who's a known skeptic, discussing earlier, with UFOs, sometimes and in his perspective always, I guess, you may not be dealing with what you think you're dealing with. It's kind of looking at error. You have no idea what these things could be until you start investigating. The idea that you know at the outset all of the possibilities, it's
my view of Mick, or can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought my internet froze. Okay, so my view of Mick, and I've had some pretty tough interchanges with him, is he's either trying to produce disinformation, or he is one of these people that cannot be ambiguity tolerant. He's had experiences, and he is fighting like hell to disprove the reality of them. And so I first began because I would lay out a logical system for it. I could write down the predicate calculus, showing him the logic, showing that what he was saying fell apart in the face of logic, and he simply refused to even look at it. So I just gave up on it. I really got like okay, look, you're useless. I'm not wasting another moment on you. And I discouraged everybody I knew who wanted to do this. Of course, a lot of people want him involved with their podcasts, etc., because he, of course, is controversial and it stirs up a big audience. I don't care about any of that. What I cared about was trying to show him that his collection of experiments or his collection of demonstrations disproved nothing, because they were not connected to the entire system of observations about the events he was doing. And I'm completely convinced, when I was preparing for this exchange with you, that he is one of these people that has seen something or had an experience, and he is desperately trying to prove it wasn't real.
You mean you're not used to the word bokeh yet?
God, I can't even. Yeah, I know. He very specifically picks things that he wants to focus on disproving, without giving much, I think, to the larger context, to the larger story. I mean,
exactly.
One video is not.
That was exactly my point. When you want to disprove something, you have to knock the entire construct down, not say, I can show you an example of one piece of evidence, absent all others, that shows this can't be real. And of course, you cannot pull that one thing out of the entire context. You have to take it all. You have to explain all of the data.
But Bob, that's what's happening in this field. And, you know, I kind of brought it up a couple of nights ago on this show, where it's almost like we have two types of ufology. There's ufology at the bottom, where everybody on social media goes to gather to try and find it. And then we have the ufology where nobody knows the names, but we have all of these scientists like Dr. Tim or Paul Kingsbury or other people who are part of the SCU who are doing diligent scientific work on this, yet it's right out of the public eye, because the majority of the public is not paying attention to the real scientists that are doing the work. And they're not wanting to listen to that either, Bob and Tim.
Yeah,
and I think Mick does a great service, though, with although I don't, his personality is a different issue, but his, the attempt to try to prosaically explain every piece of evidence, I think, has to be the approach, right? If there's evidence that can sustain scrutiny and evidence that's, in order to believe that we're being visited, we need the evidence that's dramatic enough that it can stand up to guys like Mick, right?
Okay, so here I start from the other end of the spectrum, and here let me give you the context in which I live and approach this. So the evidence that we are seeing is taken by military people, and it's gone through this massive trial by committee throughout the government, every part of the IC, all departments in DOD involved, et cetera, political people on the intelligence communities and the armed services committees. And only after all of those people have passed a wand over it, they say, here's something weird, and we don't know what it is. To me, if you cannot take the context of the people who are telling you and how they had to have arrived at, we don't know what it is and don't know how it works, you're just whistling Dixie, and it's a waste of time. These people, look, 70-something years, they lied, said none of this was real, and you are all a bunch of kooks. And now they're going to turn through a door and lie about the thing being real? No, it just makes no sense.
But you have to understand the perspective and the scrutiny, though, whether it's from Mick West, who I don't personally agree with, because I think he's being naive for the sake of having an argumentative voice rather than actually trying to listen to the facts. And there's others out there like that. But for so long, Bob, the public has been told by these old school researchers, don't trust the government, don't trust the government scientists, don't trust. And that's how we got to this point.
Well, their opinions were correct, because now we know that they shouldn't have been trusted. And I'm telling you that. So just one collection of incidents around the USS Teddy Roosevelt in 2014. We know from witnesses, based on public statements, like the Navy lieutenant who flew an airplane next to the cube inside of a spherical energy field or whatever it was, and we know that they saw hundreds of them a day for months.
Very true. Tim?
Does anyone know what they are?
No.
Do you think anyone knows what they are?
I don't think they know, or they wouldn't say they're unknown.
Well, that is the fun part.
I'm of the opinion they know less than we think. They may have more information, but I don't think in terms of government, I don't think they have answers. I think they probably just have more information.
So I still don't think we know what the Space Force is really about, because there was a Space Force inside the Air Force, and is pulled out of that and made independent. And I think it's possibly because tens of thousands of spacecraft are about to go into orbit, along with other things that they're going to be tremendous sensors for. And, the people have been forbidden, if they fly on a U.S. government vehicle, to mention UFOs if they see them in orbit.
All right, gentlemen, I'm going to get you to hold on right there, because that was a fast half hour, and we are going to go to break here at the bottom of the hour. Science Bob and Friends with Dr. Bob McGwier and Dr. Tim Brigham continues here on Spaced Out Radio right after this. More UFO talk, alien talk, disclosure talk, and whatever else we could talk about. That's what we're going for tonight. Stay tuned.
Yeah, we're having fun.
Well, I caused myself a long night right off the bat here.
Why?
Because I thought I hit start on Spreaker right after I hit the start on YouTube, and I didn't. And so your first, the first 6 minutes of the show is gone. So that
you yank the audio out of it.
No. I got it. So I got to go. Now what I have to do is, after the show tonight, I got to edit up this piece, and then I have to wait till I'm done YouTube, download YouTube, change it to an MP4 format, and then steal the audio that way for 6 minutes.
That's what I said. You get the audio from this, but it's going to be a long night.
That's right.
Do you have to download your own audio to go back to edit it?
Yeah.
You have to download it from YouTube to. Better you than me.
Let's let's be kind today. He is technically challenged.
Not as technically. I'm starting to learn how to edit video now.
Oh my God!
Yeah, I'm starting.
Look, I'm willing to give you a login on my supercomputer where I've got like $100,000 of software.
Yeah. Yeah, but then I'll just ruin it, Bob. I'm not going to lie. I'll probably break it.
No, I'm going to put you in a virtual machine where you can't get at it.
He's going to put you in a simulation.
Remember me? I'm the guy that worked at NSA for 20 years.
Oh, I know. Yes, my favorite conversation, Tim, ever with Bob was about a month and a quarter after I met him in San Francisco. And literally, we talked almost every day, and he calls me up one day with his real serious voice, and he goes, "You and I need to have a talk," in that southern drawl. And I'm like, oh, God, I screwed up at some point on the show. And he goes, "You know who my friends are?" He goes, "Well, my friends checked my cell phone records and wondering why I keep calling a foreign national in Canada. So if you want to remain friends, we literally I'm going to need your name, your phone number, and your address and your birthday right now." And I'm like,
and I'm giving them to the MIB.
Yeah. So I'm like, is there going to be a file on me in the Pentagon? And he's like, probably.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, yes, let's do it. Let's do it. I want to be flagged going across the border now. Oh, yes. Made me feel big for just like that brief moment. My kids will say on my deathbed, "What did your father accomplish in life?" He's got a one-page dossier in the Pentagon.
You can't cross the border.
Can't cross the border because he's got aliens. Mm-hmm. Bob, I got a couple of questions for Tim when we come back, if you don't mind.
No, we just had fun the first half hour. Let's do some talking.
Me too. All right, gentlemen, we got about 2.5 minutes. That's good stuff tonight. Good stuff.
Oh, wait till we get there. We're going to throw a little controversy in, too.
Mm-hmm. What's your cat's name there, Dr. Tim?
Oh, this is Yuki. Girl.
Good-looking kitty.
You might hear her screaming later.
Oh,
I have
that's
to
okay.
keep letting her and the dog, both of them, go in and out all night.
So how was the relocation to Arizona? Okay?
Yeah, it's just great out here. Yeah, I love it out here. So it's been out here about 3 years now.
Yeah, I did quite a bit of work in Tucson, on and off for decades.
Okay. Yeah, the Southeast, man. I can't see going back there except to visit. Just the weather and everything out here is so much better.
Yeah.
Except for the 3 months of the summer, you can't go outside, or do anything. But the heat's so terrible. But
we have 2 seasons here, Tim. We have winter and we have mosquito season.
Oh wow!
I still have snow.
Where are you at exactly?
I'm about halfway up British Columbia.
Okay.
Huh. Yeah. Okay, guys, hold on for a few seconds here. I want to say a big thank you in the super chat tonight from Cherry Pepsi Mike, Gorgeous Nicole, Double Tim, and Chris Reap. Really appreciate the love and support you guys have for this show, and it's a great way to support what we do on a nightly basis. If you're new here, do us a favor, hit that thumbs up, hit that thumbs down, or hit it sideways. Here we go. Second half hour of Spaced Out Radio is now underway. Thank you so much for tuning us in. My name is Dave Scott. Really appreciate everything your listening ears. Want to remind you that if you missed portions of this show or others, check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website, spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. Science Bob and Friends continues with scientist Dr. Bob McGwier, and tonight we are joined by special guest Dr. Timothy Brigham. There we go. I had my pen over your last name, Tim. I apologize. Couldn't see it. For some reason, when I throw my pen on my notepad where my notes are, it always goes on the person's name. Don't know why. Anyways, Tim, I want to ask you a couple of questions here. Being a psychologist, why do you believe or why do you take seriously the UFO and ET phenomena, considering that so many of your colleagues in psychology look at people who have any sort of ET contact or paranormal phenomena as being people who are suffering some sort of psychosis, maybe, split personality disorders, things like that.
Right. Yeah, with, as we'd say in psychopathology, right, mental illness, in other words, being associated with UFOs or sightings or anything like that is just a myth. There's never been any evidence at all for any connection between mental illness and reports of UFOs. If you can clearly go back and look at the literature, and there are interviews that Berthold Schwartz did with people who ran, large state level hospitals with thousands of patients, and not once did they ever have a patient who came in, seeing flying saucers. It's never been connected to mental illness in that way. There are questions about personality that relate to, are some people more likely or more prone to report something than other people? That's a different question. But, generally, you can look at it kind of at the perspective of or certain people more likely to report or see something in the first place. And again, my interest kind of from there typically is what is the impact that has, on the person doing the reporting. So.
Okay, but when it comes to the ET abduction side, and I'm very familiar with this from my own experiences that I've had, and a lot of our listeners have had that too. And I want to ask this before we get back to Bob. When you look at an ET contactee or you study this, there's a lot of people, even in the SCU, who originally didn't believe that this phenomena was actually going on. I remember talking to Paul Kingsbury about this, before he got his grant a number of years ago to study why people believe and go out and study the paranormal phenomena. And it was an incredible thesis that he wrote on it. But for the regular person out there who's experiencing it, they may not know that there are people like you and the SCU who are out there and want to hear these stories and want to hear some professional opinion on what's going on.
Right, sure. And, the aspect of psychology that I try to bring, again, is not a negative focus on it in terms of being a mental illness kind of thing. That's not really, and that probably goes back even to the 1950s with the Robertson panel. I think that was the first time I saw mention of this idea that we should tie UFO reports to mental illness because that would help make it go away, but there's never been any evidence that that's in any way related from what I can see. So, really, it's an existential question to figure out, are we being visited by either extraterrestrials or some other form of intelligence? And if not, then what are we doing and why are we having these experiences? And there's no simple explanation. Just saying that people that report those things are just off their rocker just doesn't suffice. It doesn't, doesn't take care of it. Then again, having said that, though, I am skeptical also of the extraterrestrial explanation. I don't know what that leaves, but there seem to be, a lot of elements. I don't know if you guys would agree with this, that some elements of what might be considered paranormal, poltergeist effects, things like that, sometimes come into play with UFO experience. So, how do you fit those together?
I can't speak for Dave, but I just want to say that I am a longtime reader of, follower of, and admirer of Jacques Vallée and John Keel and Gray Barker and George Ford. So I think they have a finger on this stuff is weird. And it's not a bunch of aliens from Alpha Centauri necessarily. So right. I don't have one thing against that. Anybody who's read Vallée, and a lot of people believe he is the ultimate science person involved in UFOs these days. He believes it's something weird, that it's not just aliens. Dave, you got anything
nailing
else?
Down how you test something regarding that is where the difficulty comes in, right?
Exactly. So Dave, I have a question I want to pursue. So I noticed that you are involved in attempts to quantitatively assess belief in these things in terms of, why don't you tell our audience what the paranormal belief scale is and how it's done, how you instrument or assess a person on this paranormal belief scale. So first, what is it? How does it work?
Right. So, yeah, and here we come to kind of a dichotomy. This is where there's the distinction between belief in something as paranormal versus the experience of that thing. And in psychology and in science, it's kind of safe to look at the belief aspect of it because we can therefore say, well, you believe it doesn't mean it's true, right? So the TBS, and I'm kind of recalling here, was a questionnaire that just assessed likelihood to believe in superstitions and paranormal things, right? Which, if I recall, I think it was by Tobiachek, if I remember. Long story short, it's one of the longer existent surveys in paranormal and in regards to psychology. But again, it assesses belief in things like ESP, belief in extraterrestrials, not so much sightings or experiences with those things, right? But I think those kind of measures would be what we could apply, as a form, kind of a standardized assessment measure that we could deliver to people who are willing to report back.
Okay, so there's going to be a huge difference in someone believing in something that they have zero experience in, and someone certain of something because they have a lot of experience.
Sure.
So yes, Tobiachek from 1983.
Okay, gotcha. And there are some problems with that scale from what I haven't seen it in years, but the question clusters are kind of weird. Some of the they put questions on there that didn't seem to necessarily fit with the overall theme, in my opinion. But it is, again, one of the longer or the more well-researched scales. And that's what I'd like to see us kind of maybe eventually do, maybe get some questions from those kinds of inventories and see what we could look at in terms of human psychology related to people that report on a larger scale, right?
Right. So,
because if you think about what Valet said, the impact of these sightings or these events on people could really be the big point of all this, right? If you think about it as a thermostatic, mechanism, as he talks about it, right? That these things cause changes and shifts in our society and our personal lives and our psyches. That maybe it's something like that. Of course, the thermostatic idea is intriguing, but how do you really test that kind of feedback loop, right? I don't know, but certainly interesting.
So blind polls showed that in the United States and in Canada both, belief in UFOs, no matter what one ultimately thinks they are, was large before 2016-17 and all the revelations. And I think the basic difference is that there's been a tick up in belief, but what's really changed is people are talking about it openly. They're talking about it in social media, talking about it in church, talking about it on the nightly news. I mean, this is a major paradigm shift.
Yeah, and it's heated up, and over the past, since the Navy stuff's come out, it certainly has picked back up. Business has picked back up, right? Which to me kind of is indicative. Maybe people in charge really don't know what's going on with this, and which is, going back to stuff with SCU. One of the things we did recently was request more data regarding some of these recent Navy incidents by FOIA request, Freedom of Information request. To try to obtain any additional video from any of these incidents, any radar tracking, any electronics, anything that could help us figure out what these things are, so we don't have people like Mick, for example, saying, well, it's a glare, right? Well, if there's an additional 20 seconds of video, we don't have to argue about whether the thing's a glare or not. We might be able to see see it in finer detail or whatever, but having the data be publicly accessible so we could look at it better, look at it more thoroughly is obviously what we're hoping to do. And as of yet, we haven't heard back. But
okay, so let me tell you what I know from personal interaction with members of the crew on one or more ships that were involved in the incident.
Right.
And I'm going to give you my interpretation of what they're telling me. Shortly after this collection of events, people came on board in Air Force uniforms and suits, and they clearly got on board with permission of the captain and the commander of the Nimitz carrier group. And they demanded all that evidence and took it away, and no one's seen it. Some of them had a look at it, and they can tell you about it, but they can't show you any of it because it's gone. It was erased off the hard drives on board those ships.
Yeah, I've heard that they came and picked up those, what are the data bricks they're called, or whatever.
Yep. And made sure that what was left behind was erased. So people tried to make copies and so forth so that they could preserve some of it, and that stuff is gone. Somebody was thorough. So let me give you my interpretation. Just because of other things, including recent incidents. I think the Navy has an idea how to poke the dragon to see if it'll bite. And they've been testing it for 15 or 20 years. And given the kid incident in 2019 and other things, I think that we are now seeing evidence that they know how to stir it up. And they're trying to figure out what it is and how it works by having them show up so they can do all sorts of observations on them. Kind of nothing else makes sense.
It's kind of like
because the people that came on board were prepared to come on board at a moment's notice. You can't arrange that kind of thing, especially across branches of the service, overnight. This was arranged ahead of time.
Well, I mean, Bob, that also gets to the point, too, that this is almost playing out like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the movie, right now. Except they're playing it in the ocean rather than at Devil's Tower, which is a stump.
Yeah.
So if you had to speculate about how they might try to poke the dragon, what would you guess that they might do?
Probably some type of irritating emission or a whale sound or something. They have some way of emitting something that says, we're here, come take a look. And they're getting a response.
Interesting.
And so with the USS Kidd and the two other two other ships of similar class, the reports are these things which were unknowns flew in right over the vessel, and the commander of that group ordered no action be taken, even though their vessels and their personnel were in danger. That is an order from above. No captain risks his vessel and risks his or her vessel and the people on board unless they're ordered to. So I believe this was poking the bear. I said, there you go. That's just one person's belief, and I hold it strong.
Well, going to what I hope happens here with some of this attention is that people like Kevin and Robert with SCU that do the real analyses of the hardcore analyses of the videos and such. If we can get more, if there's more video and they want it figured out, why don't you release the video? I mean, as we said in the FOIA request, the direct statement from the video they confirmed said that nothing sensitive is revealed about measures, nothing about methods. If there's an additional 15 seconds of video, why wouldn't? If there's radar data, why would you not release it if you really want to know what this is?
Okay, so I can tell you the radar data, should they release it, reveals intimate, critical details about the capabilities of the system, and they're never going to do it.
Right.
They're not going to do anything that tells our adversaries how well our stuff works.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, the problem I think you have though is you have these small groups, and George Knapp even recently said that he heard it was one person working on this DNI report. You have small groups of people, whether they be a handful or you don't address all the possibilities. It's impossible for one person or three people to, completely investigate a sighting and eliminate every possibility. I think what I'm getting at is having the stuff be out there for the public, public open source, whatever you want to call it, right? I think that's the next step, really. If they don't know what it is, and let us figure out what it is to the best of our ability.
I would love for them to do that. I don't think permission will be given. So look, you'll know when this report comes out. But according to RUMINT, that's rumor intelligence, RUMINT, the person who now runs that office is 2 ranks lower than the person before them, and they weren't given any of the black security clearances they would need to see stuff. And it's like, let's see how little we can do and get away with telling the Senate how little we can. I mean, that's just what it feels like to me. Is they're going to issue a report and it'll have nothing new in it, except we see these things.
Yeah. Well, who wants to catch that football? Nobody wants to be the person that says, what was it back in the 40s when they came out with they tried to come out with the assessment of flying saucers were actually ET craft visiting Earth, and they canned that because it just it wasn't going to go over well. Nobody in the military wants to be the guy that it's not part of your job description. You're not likely to, if you're not ordered directly to go investigate what these things are, you're not doing it just as a hobby. If that makes sense, what I'm getting at there.
The chief of the Air Force said, I reject this interpretation, and sent it back down and told them to have all the reports destroyed. Of course, a bunch of people hid copies of that report in their desks and later produced them. But you're correct. They wanted to bury it, and they did. They successfully buried it for 30, 40 years with the Condon report, which the assessment written in the front completely contradicted all of the work of the scientists that were internal, because people don't read.
Right. Yeah, Condon was only interested in his summary. He was not interested in what the rest of the text had to say.
Yeah,
the actual descriptions of what happened. He didn't.
Yeah, he never interacted with the data. It was just ridiculous. So I have an interest in whether or not there are now many new data science capabilities with inexpensive hardware to run this data science, on which we could do some very interesting statistical analysis that could do a major improvement on this paranormal belief scale that's based on data.
Yeah. That's definitely something I think, the next step in my perspective is kind of gathering these larger scale measures of just like you're talking about, or creating a better one, however you want to look at it.
Okay, so do you think a place to start is reaching out to communities where people of this belief in this stuff gather in order to start building the database, or does it truly need to be a random sample?
Yeah, that's a good question. It takes some time to think on that. Now, you would want to have a control, quote unquote, sample, I would expect, along with people who have experienced, right? So I would say you would want to target, because the people let's put it this way. Yeah, you'd want to target both people who have reported experiences, and then as a contrast, people who may not have or have not. That would be my first thought on it, at least. But my take, and I've kind of thought a little bit about this, would be to go back and look at some scales like this TBS and other scales that might have good questions that have been validated, but the whole scale itself might not be that useful. Maybe take some of the clusters and get some of the more important questions and attach those to inventories that would be sent out to witnesses, something like that. So.
Well, that would be terrific. Maybe we could.
And it would, of course, be objective, standardized stuff that could be, computerized digitally. And we're not talking about Rorschach blots. It would be literal questions on a Likert scale, as that would be easily.
We got it captured in data that we can manipulate on a computer.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, that's really interesting. Dave, you got anything?
Yeah, I got a lot of questions for you in regards to, the whole movement towards disclosures. We got about 2 minutes to go here. Do you believe that psychologically, or have you looked into, Tim, psychologically, how this will affect the mass population of this planet, where still half of the 7.8 billion people on this world, choose to believe in a religious deity that really believes that anything that comes from the sky is of demon descent or demonic descent. We have a bunch of people who don't believe, who are known to panic. You look at the way society has handled the COVID pandemic. We haven't handled it very well, especially at the beginning when we were hoarding toilet paper and anything that came to mind. Are we really ready for any sort of disclosure?
I don't know. I mean, if you could look at it as people like to say, an indoctrination process of 70 years of either, on the part of someone in the human world or whatever the other is, right? But, I don't know. People have often said that maybe it's an indoctrination so that slowly over time we could kind of make these adjustments as a society. I don't know. We'll never really know, right? I mean, people have speculated. People, more philosophers, have speculated. I think really than because it's not something you can really gather data about unless you kind of compare it as some folks like to do to human interactions, right? People from one culture being demolished by an invading culture and things like that. So, long story short, I don't know how you'd even ever answer that until it happened. Really, I don't think it would destroy our world like some people might have wanted to think in the 40s or 50s. I don't really think that we'd have chaos in the streets or anything like that. But it's tough to say, right? I mean, I think it would be different now very much so than it would have 50 years ago. If, whether you believe in indoctrination or not, the reaction, I think, just because of how culture has changed, would be completely different than it might have in 1950, for example.
Well, it's something that we could potentially see in the next little bit here as we move closer and closer to this continuing to be mainstream news. Is it disclosure? Is it confirmation? We don't know. Science Bob and Friends will continue after the break coming up here at the top of the hour. Dr. Bob McGwier is with us as he joins us once a month, not to talk about the woo, but the who, the what, the where, the when, the why, and most importantly, the how. Our special guest tonight is psychologist Dr. Timothy Brigham. He is with the SCU, Scientific Coalition of UAP Studies. We will be back with more Science Bob and Friends on Spaced Out Radio right after this. All right, boys, we're clear?
Yeah, I was going to mention, Jeremy McGowan?
Yeah.
Just remember we are live on YouTube.
Gotcha. Yeah, he's using the Sky Hub, I think, with his Osiris setup.
Yes, he is.
Okay, that'll be cool. Yeah, I was surprised that there's actually footage already from them operating. I didn't think it was already running like that.
So the first time we put a neural network on an NVIDIA Jetson and hooked the fisheye camera, which, boy, that took a little while to convince people we wanted to start with the fisheye. But anyway, we did. Put it on top of a building in downtown Houston. The first night, we got 2 UFOs doing non-ballistic motion.
Oh.
The first night. Yeah, pretty neat. And this weird thing that fell out of the sky in Alaska in the last few days, that is just wild.
Yeah, that was that was weird. And there's 2 things too. There's like something that looks like a bag or something, and there's something in the background. So I don't even know which is what. But if you look at the very end, something else shows up.
There's these 2 objects which are fumbling around while they're falling. But the interesting thing to me is nearer to the end, there are this object which is under control and maneuvering, comes in from the right of the screen. Yeah, that's the most interesting thing in that whole film to me.
Right. Yeah. That's where it's at. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting if we can get better and better images using that. Do you think there's a point at which you get a structured craft ever show up on an image like that?
Yeah, because look, we're putting a 60 millimeter Microtubules Cassegrain telescope in there, so the fisheye will see stuff, and it'll tell us where to point the telescope, and it will have quite a bit of magnification, and we'll be able to track it and stabilize images. So machine learning is now capable of upping the resolution of an image that it didn't have when it arrived and stabilizing it to the point where all the jitter is removed.
Mm-hmm.
Even with handheld videos, you can mostly remove jitter.
Now, does that system, automatically check against flight paths and stuff, or do you have to manually go?
So that was one of the first decisions that I made when talking with Steve, and we agreed that we should do it, and the following things are not in there but will be. We are listening to ADSB and UAT to track airplanes as they go over. If they're emitting, then we will say that is not something you're interested in because it is emitting a beacon. That's number one. And number two, before dawn and after dusk, we will try to eliminate anything that is a satellite reflecting sunlight that's no longer illuminating us, but is still illuminating the spacecraft. So all of those Starlink spacecraft won't be in our database. I'll be right back.
Okay. I'll ask you when you get back.
Yep.
All right, boys, we got 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Hey, Virgil. Hey, Ben from UFO Garage. How you doing? Gary the Dutchman. How are you? Tosca Hawkins, welcome to our chat room. This may be your first time here. How you doing? Welcome. Where'd Science Bob go? Well, Bob lose power? Maybe the aliens got him. Did Science Bob say he'd had to leave there for a quick second?
He said he'd be right back a minute ago, but I didn't know if he was signing off or what he was doing.
I don't know. He seemed to sign off there for a second. Oh, there he is. Where'd you go, Science Bob?
My computer restarted because it wanted to do an update, and I had not disabled it doing the automatic update.
Oh.
Always the worst timing, right?
Oh, we used to get that quite a bit. Oh, hey, Clam. Okay, guys, we have 20 seconds. Big thank you to Cherry Pepsi Mike, to Nicole, to Tim, to Chris for the awesome super chats tonight. We really do appreciate it. Great way to support this show is hit that thumbs up, and let's do this thing right now. Hey, shall we? Let's.
You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show.
Second hour of Spaced Out Radio is now underway. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us tonight. We really do appreciate earning your listening ears. We want to say hello to everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on TalkStream Live, Revolution Radio, and KPNL. All of our archives are free for you by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do old Davey the favor, hit that subscribe button. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Macanuel. Macanuel is your password. Use it wisely, space travelers, as the Clam sets the password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. We introduce Science Bob McGwier, formerly of Virginia Tech University, and our special guest tonight, Dr. Tim Brigham, for Science Bob and Friends, where we are getting into the who, what, where, when, why, and how of everything supernatural that's going on. Science Bob, thanks for joining us, and Tim, thank you for having the time to spend with us as well.
Hey guys, thanks again for having me on. I wanted to ask, we got off the topic there, but we were talking about Sky-Hub a minute ago. I was just wondering, how many Sky-Hubs do you guys have out there working right now?
It's got to be over 100.
Oh, wow.
Now, of course, there are not that many people out there with fully assembled systems, and that's because we've just now put up for purchase on the Sky-Hub website, a new Sky-Hub store, for you to purchase the 3D printed box that all your toys will go in. So if people want to get in on the action, they should go to the Sky-Hub Discord chat room and join the enclosure group so that you can be told how to go and decide whether or not you want to purchase one of these 3D printed boxes. And it really is will make life easy, because it's a specifically prepared enclosure that will help provide environmental protection, keep out the weather, allow you to do cooling, mounts for the computers and other things, so that you won't destroy stuff moving it around. And to me, the nicest thing about it, the way this thing mounts, is it'll make it mobile. So, for example, I'm going to be carrying mine out when I go visit Melinda Leslie, and we're going to have Sky-Hub watch Melinda Leslie call things down and see if I can't get some interesting video.
Now, relatedly, that makes me think, have you thought about trying to have anything emit, since we were talking about poking the dragon? What could you send out?
Okay, so that's a very good question, but it has a really easy answer. And it is mostly illegal, because in order to transmit almost any place interesting, except Wi-Fi, which is a noise zoo, you have to have a license to operate given you by the Federal Communications Commission, and any emissions which are not in these kind of these trash bans for things like Wi-Fi is going to get you a big fine and your stuff taken away from you.
Gotcha.
That's the reason for passive radar. So passive radar, you don't need a license to emit, because you're using somebody else's large emitter. What you have to do is have a computer and a radio capable of doing interesting reception using multiple antennas and an amazing amount of computation. But with these new GPUs on these little computers, we can do an amazing amount of signal processing.
Oh, it's interesting stuff.
Dave?
Tim, I want to ask you, in regards to the SCU, for a lot of people who may not be familiar with the scientists who are involved with this and what it's all about, explain to us, what is it?
Sure.
We've never really had that explained on this show.
Yeah, SCU is really, it's just a group of scientists and people, mostly scientists. There are other, people with journalism and so forth backgrounds, but mostly scientists who were interested in the topic. Evolved from MUFON years ago. I know some of the people that founded the SCU were higher up in MUFON, but they decided, when MUFON started promoting certain things they didn't agree with as being based in science, then they didn't want to be involved in that. So, I'm thinking here about secret space programs and things like that was, I think, one of the breaking points. But so anyway, SCU, it is meant to be a more scientific organization based purely on scientific scientific evidence, scientific discussion. We're trying to get a journal going with peer review. We've got a newsletter and things going. We've got publications. So nobody has to hold any specific position, by the way. I'm probably pretty far on the skeptical side myself, but I do think it's something that it's a question that, what's going on is a question we should answer, whether the answer turns out, whatever the answer turns out to be. And having the data available and for people to argue about and look at is important. Before I forget, I'll mention we are having it's online this year, but there's going to be an SCU conference coming up in, I think, May. You can check out the SCU website. It's Explore SCU. And Dr. Hal Putoff is going to be giving the keynote. And, there's going to be some good talks, evidence-based stuff. So anybody interested, I think there's a limit on how many people can register, but if it's something you're interested in the details of, that level of analysis, which, hey, welcome to come check it out and see what you think. So.
Awesome. So many in this field believe that mainstream science and scientists have zero interest in this topic because that's the way we've always felt, and it's become almost cliche of sorts, Tim. So the SCU proves quite differently that this is actually going on, that there are accredited scientists that are looking very much into this field and the ramifications of it. What goes on in those meetings, and how do we get the mainstream public or those who believe in UFOs but may not know about the SCU to become a little bit more familiarized with it?
Right. Well, we do try to network with other scientists, just word of mouth, right? People that are in, and there are a lot of scientists who are interested, but as Bob said, where's the funding, right? Being interested in something doesn't mean that you can devote your entire lab facility to it and all of your undergraduates and your graduates and everything else, right? I mean, someone has to pay for that. And I think this comes back to where if we're going to really kind of try to address this topic or this question of UFOs or this problem, however you want to phrase it, there does have to be some kind of funding there. There has to be some kind of support for labs, academic labs. I'll give you an example of when I was in grad school. I worked in a lab that was devoted to fighter pilot testing. How they make judgments and decisions about identifying other things in the sky under certain orders versus other orders, all that kind of stuff. And that's the kind of thing I would expect, would be valuable now. Someone that had a lab like that would, I'm thinking specifically about these Navy encounters, right? I mean, how accurately can you identify an object at that distance? I don't know the answer to that because it's an empirical question, right? Even eventually I could see if it gets into sensitive topics, which we'd have to probably get permission to address. But if Commander Fravor, for example, was interested in participating in stimulus kind of response testing about, again, questions like under a simulation, how accurately can you identify a tic-tac 40-foot object at whatever distance, right? I'm pretty sure that bringing in a fighter pilot, would require some permissions from somebody somewhere to do that. But those are the kind of questions I think that would be, if there's a desire, there a motivation there, then that's the kind of the angle that we should take. Right.
I'm going to tell you what I think. This is just good old Bob's old opinion. I think if you brought in a bunch of gamers, and because they've been known to outperform pilots in terms of reaction time and other things, that you'd get a very good sense of how well they might be able to do if they had the right experience and training, and you could do that with no one's permission.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And this is something that we kind of, to go back to your question about how things work. There are a lot of formal things with SCU, but also we have kind of a lot of working groups that just discuss the topics. So that is actually something that some of us in the social science kind of side of things have talked about, trying to get almost a video game modeling, like a flight simulator model, where you could have a 40-foot tic-tac presented and you could have a pilot flying an F-18 or whatever in a simulation and, ask questions about it. What distance can you accurately describe that object? Things like that. And as you say, it could be, not necessarily with people that are pilots, but it could be, cross-section of people, gamers, anything else.
Yeah, I'm sure the gamers would just kill it. I mean, look. I mean, the Air Force already knows this because they recruit them to sit in those boxes out in Las Vegas, Nevada, and fly drones around the world.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, yeah, I think the answer is no, but we want to make sure we get gamers that don't have military experience so we don't have to get permission.
Right. Tim, in regards to the SCU and what you're accomplishing with that, what is the main goal behind this group? Is it the propulsion? Is it the craft? Is it whether or not we've actually had ET contact like people claim? I'm still a little unsure.
Yeah, it's the question. The mission statement is kind of general, that in the sense that we want to scientifically analyze evidence of UAP or UFO. I think there's a pretty good cross section of belief if you want to, look at opinions on things from one member to another. Like I said, I'm pretty skeptical, but even people that within SCU who feel otherwise, I certainly respect their approach to getting to that perspective, if that makes sense. So I don't know if that answers your question, right? But the goal is to get more data to be available and have a discussion forum, including peer-reviewed journal, for example, in which people can come together and kind of evaluate these claims and these evidences. So.
I want to add to Tim's assessment of that in the sense that, I've been a scientist my whole life. And then I just decided to get formal training and I got a PhD. And I've lived my life in academic and non-academic circles, but in academic circles, I can tell you, there is two words that go together and you dare not cross it. And that's academic freedom. So you don't tell people what to do. Now, you can collectively present a request for people to work on things, but scientific coalitions are made up of individuals that choose to work together or not to work together. And they all choose the research topic they care about. SCU will fail if it tries to order people to do things. That will never work, and so they're not even going to try it. So the people who choose to come in will bring their interests with them, and they can propose research projects that SCU will officially endorse or tell us to come back later when you have more. And that's their policy, is in order for you to move from affiliate to full member, you have to present a project that they approve of, carry it out, and once done and deliver a report, you're a full member.
And, there are people with different interests in terms of whether it be propulsion or whether it be video analysis. And, mine, again, being more of the psychological or sociological or whatever. So there's, put it this way, I think one of the things that UFO research has failed at in its history is getting split over issues that they don't need to be split over. For example, the paranormal issue, whether UFOs are paranormal or they're nuts and bolts, and you argue about it, and then then APRO falls apart or MUFON falls apart or whatever. I don't think those are necessarily discussion or arguments that are beneficial to have necessarily. And as long as each of us kind of does our best to approach things scientifically and rationally and keep some little bit of restraint on it, again, it's personal interest, right? What motivates each of us to ask the questions we ask, right?
Indeed.
I have a question coming from the audience, boss, from Uncle Dale in his power stash. And he is asking, have we been able to monitor neural function of anyone while they are having a UFO experience? I am very interested in what causes the experience, physical manifestation, or something happening within the brain.
Well, I'll say the short answer to that is no, not in the sense that I think they're asking. We'd like to, of course, be able to do that. But you do have, going back to, the classic Persinger God helmet, you're probably familiar with the helmet you put on your head and have hallucinations, not necessarily directly relevant to UFOs. But more recently, you have work done at, I think, Stanford, where they're looking at the neural connections of people who have had experiences, but not at the moment of the experience, if that makes sense. So I think it's actually Gary Nolan at Stanford. you've probably heard a little bit about this. I don't know any more than anyone else on that, but there seems to be some hyperconnectivity in certain brain regions and people that have had experiences. My understanding, at least from just what I can gather, is that he's had people like Travis Walton come in and get MRIs, people that you would know as experiencers. And there does seem to be some brain differences in terms of hyperconnectivity between these regions. What that means, I don't know. We'll see. But of course, it's a long stretch going from there to trying to get evidence of what's happening in the brain during the encounter, right? But and that kind of ties into the SkyHub thing I was going to mention. Would SkyHub be useful for people who have personal encounters like CE2s or CE3s or whatever you want to, right? Abductions, stuff like that. Would there be applicability?
So I'm just going to tell you what experiencers tell me. And so I have not done this experiment, but I really want to do the experiment. And that is, if what I am told is true, the interaction between those who are having the experience and the entities bringing the experience to them is there's this telepathic connection. And if the experiencer knows of the observational instrumentalities, the entities can defeat them or just not participate. So to the extent
the person would have to not know.
Exactly. So but then you have to go through this tremendous collection of permissions, right, so that you are allowed to spy on people all the time, just hoping and wait. And I just don't know many people that would agree to that.
And I know, I just kind of curious, but I know MUFON did try to do something like that back but they never did anything with the data, which is unfortunate. I don't know if they just didn't know what to do with it or what, but.
Well, I think we ought to ask Kathleen Martin whether or not they're ever going to do anything with that data. And to the extent that, say, a couple of smart people with, fancy degrees could analyze that data, they might let us.
Right. Yeah, that's something that I've wondered about for ages. I'd definitely be interested if they were willing to do that. Yeah. These days, I don't even know who would have it, honestly.
Oh, MUFON has this infinite storage bin from which nothing ever leaves.
Right.
Dave, what else you got?
I think MUFON's in a little bit of trouble that way, and I have a couple of very good friends on the MUFON board of directors, and I don't know whether or not they can get things done to turn MUFON around to make it as prominent as it was. I think they had dropped, and this on a personal level, I think they dropped the ball before the TTSA came aboard, and when TTSA came around, they really didn't respond to anything public. There were no press releases. There were no reactions. I mean, people from MUFON on that board of directors should have been all over the media when these stories broke, and there was nothing to be heard out of them. And I found that kind of disgraceful, to be honest, for a group like that to be having those types of anonymity when they're supposed to be the biggest group in the world with this information. And who knows what's going to happen. I think that they're still in a lot of trouble trying to deal with the Jan Harzan situation. They don't know what to do there. So with MUFON, let's, for a lack of a better term, say put on the shelf for right now, who can people actually turn to, Tim, to give or get proper information? Is it the SCU?
I think I would like to think so. Everything that we try to put out, we put out in a way that is reviewable by, again, for peer review. The data's there. You can look at it. It can be recalculated. I would say for reporting, though, I think National UFO Reporting Center is probably the only other place I can really think of. MUFON. Great and back in the day in terms of civilian investigations, but selling magazines and conferences about secret space programs, just I don't think people were very responsive to that. So
the public is, though. That's what sells tickets.
It's a missed opportunity to take advantage of the huge number of people who are interested in doing work on the data. For example, New Fork released all of its data into a Google database, and it's called a Kaggle. And they just opened it up and invited data scientists and machine learning people to come along and say, tell us what you find. And the results were amazing. And
speaking of that, that's something else that I would like, maybe we could work on as a project, getting some of these data sets that are out there. For example, the Larry Hatch database. I know people have been, if we could get some of these databases sewn together so that they could publicly be looked at and people could scour through them in some kind of format that would be, or at least researchers could get into and dig into it. As far as I know, these databases are floating around out there. I think Valet has probably the most elaborate, or the biggest collection, but getting all that data sewn together so that people could ask kind of larger level questions, meta-analysis and stuff like that.
I would love. So the guy who basically invented the computing of database manipulation in order to help Project Blue Book and our favorite scientists do their work. Wouldn't it be great if he actually released his databases?
yeah, that would be.
So I want to return to Gary Nolan before I forget it. So Dave and I met and got to know in January of 2020 Eric Mitchell. We spent some time with him, and he has spent some time with Gary Nolan and his crew because they want to find out whether or not Eric and people like him have this connection between the caudate and putamen regions in the brain, because they believe this caudate putamen interconnection enhancement is critical to people having these experiences or attracting them. Dave, take us out of here.
Yeah, we'll get that and more coming up here on Spaced Out Radio as we go to break here at the bottom of the hour. Science Bob and Friends is a monthly feature that we do on this show where we look into the scientific side of everything paranormal, supernatural, ufological, and crypto. Not cryptocurrency, crypto the creatures. We are joined tonight by Dr. Timothy Brigham. We're having a good time. Stay tuned. More Science Bob and Friends on Spaced Out Radio right after this. I cannot believe how fast this show is going. I literally looked at the clock. We had started the hour. I looked again, and it was like literally 59 seconds left.
So I talked to Tom Whitmore for an hour today, and he told me that MUFON is doing well, that memberships are selling while people are trapped by COVID.
I hope so. I want them to do well, and I love Tom Whitmore. I do. He's like that.
Well, but he really did me a huge. He told me he's been doing this blog, and of course I've been reading it because I think he's one of the better members of the board of MUFON, one of the truly good people in it, and he's been talking about things he's been reading and studying in this blog, and people should go pay attention. I ordered some things he said, and they are invaluable.
Nice. Love stuff like that.
I just like this guy because he is interested, and if you carry on a good interaction with him and help each other think through things, he is a good guy to know and talk to.
Yeah, he's a very brilliant man. I think, though, when it comes to MUFON, I think that Tom is fighting an uphill battle with many members on that board. Many members.
Well, I don't know any details. I just know that he thinks MUFON is recovering and doing well given the mess.
I hope so. But Tom also knows how to play the game as well.
Oh, I get it. And he's on the board, and he has to protect that group because he has a interest in, because it's an unpaid position, so he's there because he wants to be.
Oh yes, yeah, and I think if they had more Toms on the board, I don't think we'd have a lot of the issues that we see today with MUFON.
There you go.
I will say that. Good times tonight.
Fast Timmy Machinist has 36 computers and dial-up. That's a guy I want to know. Not.
Hey, Off-World Adam, how you doing? Welcome. We got about 3 minutes, guys.
Off-World Adam, are you a different isotope?
Okay, Bombshell Bomber wants to know, Science Bob, what made you leave the CIA, or have you left yet?
So I left and I debriefed, and I no longer hold a security clearance as of May 8th, 9:45 in the morning in 2020.
I remember that day.
Oh, yeah. I called you to celebrate.
That was a good day.
Fast Timmy Machinist says he does not have only 36 computers and dial-up.
Good. Very, very good. Nicole's all proud because she just got 5G. And while we're waiting here, we got about a minute here. I want to introduce everybody to one of our sponsors, Mighty Moose Beard Oil. Go to mightymoosebeard.com. Gary the Dutchman there, and you know as well as I do that Dutch people don't like to give deals on anything. They really don't. But Gary the Dutchman will if you use promo code SOR 2019. Now, I don't really have a lot of hair on my beard anymore, but it's great for your hair. Ladies, it's great for you too. Helps with split ends. And all you do is rub it in your hands. You can either massage it into the beard or massage it into your hair. Now, if you're like Science Bob, this does absolutely sweet piss all for you. But
Nothing on my cue ball.
But it feels great, smells great. It's all natural, no chemicals, made in the Canadian way. Science, technology, no chemicals, and just a Dutchman in his house making beard oil. MightyMooseBeard.com. If you check it on out, tell Gary we sent you. Use promo code SOR 2019. And Gary, who's an awesome dude, he's going to give you a good deal. Check it on out, MightyMooseBeard.com. And this month, by the way, everyone, $1 of every sale will go to help raise money for Parkinson's disease study here in British Columbia. So make sure you hop on that. We're going to get going here in just a second here. And so sit back, sit tight, because the show's about to begin. We pass the halfway point of Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Really do appreciate earning your listening ears. We want to remind you that if you've missed portions of this show or others, check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website, spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. We continue on with Science Bob and Friends tonight as Dr. Bob McGwier joins us once a month to get to the scientific side of what's going on in the paranormal community, if we use that term. It's an umbrella term. And tonight we are joined by Dr. Timothy Brigham, who is a psychologist looking into and studying UFOs with the SCU, the Scientific Coalition of UAP Studies. Gentlemen, welcome back.
Happy to be here today.
Guys.
Go ahead, Science Bob.
Okay, so you recently participated in the authoring, you authored a paper on anomalous science redefining boundaries and terminology. So that has to be interesting. Tell us about that paper.
Oh, wow, going back a minute now, that's been a while. That's probably 10 years ago to Society for Scientific Exploration. Really, at the time, I was interested in the fact that a lot of what I perceived as kind of arbitrary boundaries between the phenomena that were discussed. So you might have a person, and I remember this specifically, a person who delivered an entire discussion and presentation on the table tipping phenomenon. If you're familiar with, mediums who would, right, and somebody else is doing these eggs that were random number generators placed all over the planet, but none of these things ever really came together, never really tied together, right? So that was really what I was getting at there, and I think in retrospect I probably would have phrased a lot of that differently, but so I proposed this kind of idea of just anomalous science in general, right? Because some of these things do seem to interact or overlap, right? And how much that is because of the UFO or the Bigfoot or whatever, and how much of that is just based on having a reaction as a human being to something weird is what something else I'm interested in, right? I mean, you guys have probably heard this. People that report Sasquatches will sometimes report the Oz effect, just like a UFO experiencer might. So I don't know what that means, but the impact of encountering something of high strangeness and what it does to your brain and your personality and how it changes you. I think that's a question that it's not related specifically to UFOs beaming something at you or radiating a fear beam or something. Maybe it's just partly how we respond to something that we can't figure out how to comprehend, right? We might not even have language for a lot of this. So anyway, my ramble. But
No, it's a great answer, because it leads right to someplace I'd like to go. So I don't know whether or not you're familiar with, but we might as well discuss the work of Donald Hoffman, who is a cognitive scientist at the University in California. And he is a polymath that I can easily identify with, but he has applied evolutionary game theory to the field of consciousness. And let's assume that the collection of assumptions he's made are correct. If the collection of assumptions Hoffman's made is correct, the game of evolution, as applied to the ascent of human beings from the primordial soup to the intelligent upright bipeds, says that our set of perceptions of what we call reality are all an illusion, and that any being which can perceive actual reality is disadvantaged through the objective function in the evolutionary game. I thought it was really interesting. So let's say Hoffman's right. And so that we don't actually perceive things as they really are. We live in an illusion. That says to me that reality is bendable. And so that lends credence to the kinds of things you were discussing in the 2013 paper. And now you know why I brought it up. Because people interpret things in different ways, and they have their own set of experiences and beliefs, etc., and they filter whatever they see through their set of illusions.
Sure. Yeah, and that's an interesting issue right there. I mean, at what level does that happen, and I'm thinking back to, if you're familiar with the author Robert Anton Wilson, he talked about an experience where as a kid he thought he saw a 7-foot spider before he knew any better that there was no such thing as a 7-foot spider, right? But these kinds of experiences that we don't have a box to put it in, right? The idea that maybe we just filter them out because you can't really cope with that, right? And it he also ties into the idea that with certain kinds of psychosis or certain kinds of hallucination, intoxication, one argument is that you're actually perceiving a bigger breadth of reality because you're receiving signals that normally are filtered out in your brain, right? So, yeah, definitely interesting, right? But where do you go from there?
Yeah, well, so let's just keep going down the rabbit hole. Roger Penrose is well known to many people as the person who, with Stephen Hawking, kind of laid the foundation for credible work, theoretically and experimentally, in terms of observationally, about black holes. He defined what a singularity was and all these other things. But Roger Penrose wrote this book around the time he was done with all that work with Hawking, for which he won the Nobel Prize this last year, by the way, in physics. But he started working on this book called The Emperor's New Mind, where he thought that quantum mechanics and quantum field theory had to have something to do with consciousness. And Hameroff came to him, and Hameroff is a PhD and a medical doctor, and an anesthesiologist. And he says, look, there are these structures running throughout the brain called microtubules.
Microtubules.
And they are the natural mechanism for the interaction with the quantum fields that you're talking about. And people began shooting at them. And so slowly but surely over the last 15 years, they have knocked down each and every argument that has been made against this. And I think they're pretty close to having it accepted widely. And then there comes along this consciousness as an electromagnetic field thing paper, which says our consciousness is non-local to our brains, that it interacts with, at a minimum, the electromagnetic fields around us. So if you and I are in a room and our brains are particularly electromagnetically active, our fields can become entangled, and we are now one quantum system. And so this stuff is really, really neat. And just this quantum biology and quantum communication and quantum computing with Hameroff and Penrose showing with a bunch of scientists in Australia helping them that the warm brain can do quantum computation without loss of, oh, dude, I sure do wish I was with you right now. Anyway, okay.
Bob's getting excited here, people.
I'm getting very, very excited, and we will not tell the audience why. But the Alabama Senate voted yes just a month ago. Let's hope it happens. Okay, so anyway, where I was going was, I think that we are about to come to this vast set of realizations where actual progress is made on consciousness. And the other thing that Penrose did that he's just going to be remembered for forever, along with some others, but Penrose was the leader, is the consciousness is not a computer program running on the computer of your neural networks, and he can prove it. So if our consciousness cannot be contained in our brain, then we have to accept that there's some kind of field theory that governs it, and I don't see why CME and microtubules, et cetera, aren't a deal. So I just thought it would be interesting if we just batted a few ideas around and discuss all this crazy stuff that's happening, because it impacts everything, not just psychology, sociology. It says that we as conscious beings have other ways we could interact that we have closed ourselves off from.
Yeah, and there's even some arguments from I'm trying to remember the guy's name now, that second sight or first sight was the name of the book, that we perceive information by mechanisms that we don't always identify as part of or we may assume it's to our five senses, but there's other ways that we unconsciously perceive information that might be picking up on these other kinds of signals, or however you want to, think about it.
So in our audience, I have a friend. I'll call her out as Jules. And she's a regular in the audience, and Dave as well. They are fully capable of. I posed a problem to Jules recently after I saw that she had been interviewed by Simeon Hine and given a test, and I said, Jules, look, somebody's putting cameras on my property, and it's not me. And I says, I want you to help me out. Take a look around. And the first thing she did was find 4 of the 5 cameras that I had put on the property without me telling where they were. And then she gave me a bunch of information which I am not going to discuss here, but it is completely irrelevant. And she and Dave independently had given me the same information. And they're doing remote viewing. They've never been here. Dave and I have been with each other in San Francisco, but Jules and I have never met. And they only know what this weird thing they can do tells them. Remote viewing is a deal that we just stopped investigating in the open when Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ stopped doing that work, and the CIA went all dark on it, et cetera, DIA, et cetera. And it's just foolish because we can see it happening with people knowing us that we know, doing things for us in a way that shows remote viewing works.
Yeah, and I don't know how much of it ties into this, but people like John Alexander have said that a lot of that stuff got shut down, and specifically the UFO stuff, because of this group that they called the Collins elite, who are conservative Christians. I don't know the truth to that, but it's certainly been a long-standing rumor,
Well, so when we had John on during Science Bob, because he is quite the scientist himself.
Oh yeah,
with
yeah.
Doctorate, et cetera. And he said basically all of those things. And John and I both have visited and spent time with Chris Bledsoe, and both of us left after having strange experiences.
He still scares me.
Yeah, I know.
Just going to put that out there. He still scares me. There aren't many people who scares me.
John ran the Pentagon's non-lethal weapons program. He was the project manager on behalf of the uniformed military for a while. I mean, that is really that's some scary stuff.
I think if somebody, I don't always agree with John Alexander, but I do like his perspective, and I do think that he was one of the only people in a position to have dug into it that did dig into it, and he didn't find much in terms of classified programs from what, it was all off the record kind of working groups, which is, again, what leads me to think, well, does anybody really know what's going on, but definitely an interesting, intriguing guy.
Gentlemen, I have a question for you, both of you here, and I'm going to put you guys on the spot because Melinda Leslie is in our chat room, and I love Melinda and think the world of her. Even though every time she sees me, she tries to trip me for some reason. No, I'm teasing. But I wrote a blog last week, and Bob, you and I discussed this, and basically the title was, Why Now? After 70 years of cover-ups, after 70 years of people being told that they're making up stories, that they're seeing Venus in the sky, swamp gas, hot air balloons that were secrets of the United States Air Force, if we go back to Roswell, all of a sudden, UFOs are the hot button topic. Disclosure is the hot button topic. Everything is the hot button topic. Maybe it's just the topic du jour or for the year. I don't know. But for us conspiracy theorists out there, it opens up a lot of questions, gentlemen, because as much as I can respect the work of Luis Elizondo, Chris Mellon, and those of that ilk, I do not believe that they have that kind of influence to really turn an entire media and a government to get funding from taxpayers on studying UFOs. What is going on? Why now? Dr. Tim, let's find out from you first.
Well, I'll say this, one thing that I have heard from people who are connected in that regard, again, that some of these people that, whether they be Collins elite or just people that had that perspective of kind of conservative Christian viewpoint and didn't want to look at any of this, have a lot of them are retired, have moved out of their positions, which has left a vacuum, and which kind of reapproaching this is, and in a sense, I think we're trying to do, not putting blame on the government here, just saying, let's see what we got, let's try to work together. And so, did that answer your question?
No, not at all. To be to be
No,
frank
yeah.
and blunt. I mean,
So,
look, there's a lot of questions that need to be asked regarding this because, look, in my mind, as an experiencer, take my journalistic hat off and I'll throw it in the garbage for a second. But as my thoughts as an experiencer, I have a lot of questions. All right. To me, when I see all of this going down, because it always starts with the military, it never starts with the public. It makes me wonder, has there been a phone call made or some cryptic message come from the stars or from inner Earth to say, by this date, we're coming to see you and we're going to be known? Was it from inner Earth? Was it time travelers from the future? There's a lot of questions that this opens up because after 70 years of denial, Dr. Tim, to all of a sudden come out and say, we may have aliens. We may have UFOs. We don't know where they're coming from, and play dumb with it, there's something to that. The government just doesn't do anything for the sake of doing something.
yeah, and I don't know the truth to what I said. I can only say that's what I've heard from people, that there are people that were senior levels in military and government who were, because of their own belief system, not wanting to deal with this, and that some of them have moved on. So whether that's really has anything to do with it or not, I think John Alexander actually said publicly something like that. But so if that is the case, I don't know. But yeah, who knows? I do think it interesting, like you're saying, how Chris Mellon and Lou Elizondo could just these two guys. I mean, can we really not just these two guys? I shouldn't say that, but is there really a chance of getting funding and any kind of long-term commitment in regards to solving this from the government or the military, or is it just kind of going to be blown off again, swept under the rug, and we'll revisit it again in 70 more years? So.
Well, let's hope not. So, given that Melinda is in our chat room on YouTube, one thing I want to point out: people that know Melinda, especially those that go and take her tour in Sedona, Arizona, which you should do, go out and they see things with her in the sky, and you get an idea after a while that this is a truthful person that can demonstrate several things to you, including all sorts of stuff for which she offers courses. Okay, so I'm not advertising Melinda, but I'm trying to make a point. The point is, it's hard to be skeptical if you believe in people like Melinda, because she has a decades-long history of being abducted by the military in MILABS abductions, so they can figure out how a person makes the craft fly and other things like it. So if no one knows anything, then everything about what Melinda has been through is a hallucination. And
Right.
just let me say, Melinda.
So there would have to be some
let
very
me
specific.
finish the point because it's important. Melinda has people who have lived with her, who have observed the things happening to her that other people would say had to have been all in her mind. People that lived with her saw the great aliens, and people that lived with her saw the MILABS abductors. So I'm just telling you, this cannot all be just, we don't know something.
So you think somebody has to know.
knows something. Somebody knows something.
Well, and that's the big thing. Is this so compartmentalized and dissected into little groups that one group may not know, like Luis Elizondo may not know what's going on with these MILABs or going on with the full idea of disclosure? Do we even know that?
I'll mention this just to, Valet had written in his, I think one of his journals that was published, that he was shocked when he finally got into running around the Pentagon that the people in charge were all carrying around UFO books as their sources of reference at that time, right? So in the 60s and 70s, they're reading Brad Steiger books or whoever, right? Popular authors as their sources of information on which they're basing their opinions at the time. I just found that pretty shocking that was at least what Valet said, right? That the people in the know were reliant upon
Okay,
public.
so that makes an assumption that I'm about to puncture.
Okay.
I'm gonna puncture that assumption.
2 minutes, Bob.
I spent 30 years in the intelligence community, and I've been members of the deepest, darkest special access programs that are unacknowledged. And that means if I tell you the name of it or who the sponsor is, I go to prison. Not what it was about. Just tell you the name of it and who the sponsor is, I will go to prison. And you tell 9 people the secrets and tell them if you acknowledge the existence of this, you're going to Fort Leavenworth and make little rocks out of big ones. That's how you keep a secret. And I believe that Lou Elizondo is not a member of the SAP. That's just what I think. And he does not know. And anybody who's going to talk will not be a member of that group. Dave, take us out.
How could they accomplish anything, right? With that kind of control,
that's the problem.
it becomes.
They can't.
Right.
The group is too. What we need is collection of thousands of great minds deciding the right questions to ask, and then we'll get somewhere.
Right. Right.
Well, I mean, that's the big thing that we need to know. Because, look, we can sit here and say, social media and YouTube and Twitter made the UFO topic even brighter than it was before. It took it, from the fringe, but now that everybody has a camera, that we're able to film it. But this goes deeper and darker than just anything to do with YouTube or social media or the public asking questions. I mean, what the government doesn't want us to know, they are not going to speak to us. I mean, and that's the reality of it. The good news is there are people like Dr. Tim Brigham and Dr. Bob McGwier that are doing things about this and bringing us to the idea that there could be something major going on that we don't know about. But it's the dark questions, the hidden questions, that I think still need to be answered about this. Will we get those answers? I doubt it. I highly do doubt it, but we will wait and see. We have Science Bob and Friends going on for another 30 minutes here on Spaced Out Radio with Dr. Bob McGwier and our special guest, Dr. Tim Brigham, as we continue on the mighty SOR tonight on Spaced Out Radio with Science Bob and Friends, Hour 3 coming up right after this. Thanks, Rye, for the super chat. Really do appreciate that. Hey, Discovering Sasquatch, how you doing? Bob, I'm just going to run and take the puppies out. I'll be right back.
Sure.
You guys can chat away. Bob, talk to our crowd. They want answers.
What do they want answers about? Let's see.
Everything. You're Science Bob.
Yeah, right. Well, I wish I had more answers. Hey, Rye till I die, why does Nicole need forgiveness? I mean, come on, Nicole, you're not going to take that, right? I cannot do drugs now without getting into trouble because I signed agreements that are lifelong, Bomber, and I will be able to do dope as soon as the federal government says it's legal, and not until. The UFOs are not a distraction foisted on us by China, Justin. I just don't believe it, and I am not contributing. I am not a disinformation person. And yes, hey, Melinda. Melinda's in Sedona, Arizona, and that's someone you should pay attention to. I am not a shill, Benny. Come on. They are monitoring me, Bomber. I'm telling you that I'm finding cameras on my property. So I can get a pass to, Nicole, I have to call up the bosses and tell them that I'm going to a foreign country and wait until they say, yes, you are, yes, okay, or no, you're not. Oh, you're welcome, Melinda. And I'm calling you because I'm getting the Sky-Hub box together. Eric, I want to force the United States government with Sky-Hub data and other work into a box out of which they cannot get by saying it doesn't exist or it isn't real. I want the data to speak so loudly they can no longer deny it and have to deal with it. And we're getting to the point where the technology and the cost of the technology is both good enough and cheap enough that we can get there. We won't be as good as government stuff, but it'll be good enough. Chill Farm, Sky-Hub is an international project, and we have really active people in Austria, Australia, France, and all over the United States and Canada. It's a worldwide effort, and it's open source, open specification with no secrets. Yeah, Melinda, Sharon and I are buying our travel camper that we're going to go all over the place with. As soon as that happens, you and I will make arrangements. I said, yes, Bomber, I already said they are monitoring me. I agree that that's happening. But that isn't going to stop me from living. Because I'm not going to share classified information I learned while I was involved. I'm not going to, that's the deal, Bomber. As I can say anything I learned not involved in classified spaces or classified work. Something I learn out here, I can tell anybody. The classification works. I am told things in order to do my job when I'm on the classified stuff. I'm not adopting an attitude. I'm explaining. So I'm explaining to Bomber, Vinny. Come on. I'm trying to help the guy out. He doesn't understand. I'm going to help him. Okay, so I can say anything that I learn outside of a classified program. And so I don't want to be involved in classified programs anymore, so I can say what I learned. I know it's difficult. Chris Bledsoe has so many people pulling on him from so many directions, it's ridiculous. Everybody wants a piece of Chris Bledsoe. And there's tons of disinformation people running around telling people that ought to know better that nobody's interested in Chris Bledsoe. I mean, it's just amazing.
Eric with a K wants to know, does Chris Bledsoe have people from both sides pulling his ears?
I just answered.
Oh, sorry. I missed that.
Yeah.
We got 1 minute, boys.
People are pulling on Chris from every direction.
All right. Let me just...
Me too, Eric. Me too.
Big thank you to Mr. Catfish, Rye, Fapster, Melinda, Science Bob, Cherry Pepsi Mike, Nicole, Tim, and Chris for the super chats tonight. Really helps us out, do what we do here on a nightly basis. Thank you to everyone who has given us that thumbs up. If you haven't already, we would appreciate it. Or a thumbs down, whatever you feel we deserve. And if you're new listening in, do us a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that thumbs up. Hit that bell so you know when we're coming on the air. And check out our new feature, guys, on our YouTube channel if you have it. It's called True Tales. And it's short little snippets of real weird, strange experiences that people, listeners like you, have experienced. I'm open to recording. If you want to tell me your story, Dave at spacedoutradio.com is the way to go. Here we go.
Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Here we go with the third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in tonight. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We really do appreciate earning your listening ears. We want to say hello to everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on TalkStream Live, Revolution Radio, and KPNL. All of our archives are free by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do old Davey the favor, hit that subscribe button. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Mashanul. Mashanul is your password. Use it wisely, Space Travelers, as the Clam sets the password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Our website, spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. Science Bob and Friends continues until the bottom of the hour, where Dr. Bob McGwier, who joins us once a month, talks about all things not weird, not strange, but the scientific side of everything going on in the paranormal world. And we are also joined with our special guest, Dr. Timothy Brigham. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. I want to start this off with the new video that Jeremy Corbell released with the triangle craft, apparently from the USS Kidd in 2019. This is something we haven't discussed very much here. Are you guys on board with this being legit, these videos? We know the Pentagon and the military has agreed that this is real footage. What's your thoughts? Science Bob, let's start with you.
That's all I need. The Pentagon said they were real and unknown. That's it.
How about you, Tim?
Well, I'll start off with, as a general, and this is just an intuition on my part. Anytime I see something triangular, I think or feel it might be more likely to be man-made. I don't know why, but they seem to be more recent, at least in terms of explosion and number of sightings of triangular objects, more recent than whereas the round shape goes back so far. So I don't know. I certainly think it's interesting. I don't necessarily think it's tied into the actual UAP issue. It might be technology of some sort. So I don't know. We'll wait and see. But it's certainly interesting looking, right? That now you got the bokeh or whatever, which I can't fathom how somebody would. I don't understand the function of having this on the lens of the camera. Maybe one of you guys can illuminate that for me. Why they'd have a triangle, or is that supposed to be an interior portion of the camera lens? Do you guys understand what's going on with that argument? I don't even really get that yet. But.
Yeah, sure. So look, if you have light coming into your camera through the mechanical iris and it is out of focus, you can begin to see how the mechanical iris is diffracting the light into a blob, and it takes on the shape of the hole in the mechanical iris. That's called bokeh. The funniest thing I saw today is somebody spelled it bukkake, and I said, "Dude, get your get your mind off of porn." Anyway, yeah, but bokeh is out of focus effects on images.
Yeah, I'll say it's interesting, but if it is something extraordinary, I don't think it's probably connected to the genuine mystery. It could be some kind of human technology trying to mirror something that maybe is more extraordinary. I don't know. That's just my estimation.
So I'm just telling you, if I'm the commander of the USS Kidd and an object enters my controlled airspace, and I have hundreds of men and women and close to $1 billion worth of hardware under my command and my protection, I'm going to blow that shit out of the air. And he didn't. That means he was ordered not to. Otherwise, if something happened to his ship, he's guilty of dereliction of duty. I'm telling you, he's not going to do that unless ordered not to. I don't believe it was an operation done without him being told not to take action.
That's what's going to be interesting. And that's kind of my theory too, Bob, in regards to that. Maybe, Tim, you can enlighten us a little bit. But, I mean, if this, whatever they are buzzing and hovering over ships on the U.S. Navy here, how can we sit there and say that these craft are not being threatening when they're in the airspace? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and generally the idea of something unknown in the sky that a plane might run into anyway. I mean, it doesn't have to be extraterrestrial. It could be a balloon or something, right? We need to have an idea of what's going on in our skies for our commercial aviation safety and, all these other kinds of reasons. So whatever it turns out to be, just making sure that we don't fly into them or they don't fly into us, much less issues with nukes and all kinds of other things. I mean, it's a safety issue.
Right? I think the FAA is and the NTSB are absolutely freaking out now about why hundreds of pilots are reporting these interactions with objects in their close spaces, almost close enough to declare a near midair. And this just cannot go on without the government taking on responsibility of figuring out what it is. And it literally is up to hundreds.
It really is. I mean, is this happening on every naval area, or does it just seem to be happening in Catalina Island in that area right now?
No. There are hundreds of incidents maybe hundreds of incidents every year off the coast of Virginia, in the place where pilots from the Navy fly to do exercises and training. Every time they went up, they would be greeted by some crazy crap. And a lot of these images you saw that came from others that were not the pyramid were in this area off the coast of North Carolina. Lieutenant Graves, the Navy pilot, and his personnel, when they had trouble on the Teddy Roosevelt in 2014, where things were caught near midair collisions with this spherical energy field around the cube, that was in that place where they trained right off Virginia. And they just reported it, and they were called into the Senate, into a classified meeting where they showed them everything they had. I want them to show some of that to us. That's really what I want.
Okay, so we know that during the USS Kidd incident, that it was, I believe, just 3 ships that were out. It wasn't a whole fleet of ships.
Well, it was a carrier group. It was not a carrier group.
Okay, so my question is, do you think then, Tim or Bob, that the Navy, because of these encounters, now has specified ships that are going out to try and make contact?
I think they're sent out to stir them up, to see why would they do that? It's the same reason we flew into other adversaries' airspaces throughout the Cold War. We wanted to see what it would take to tickle their interest and what their response would be, so we could figure out how to defeat their systems. And they're doing exactly what they have done since World War II on. They're tickling the potential adversary to see what their defenses are and how they react, and maybe figure out how they fly with no means of propulsion visible.
Tim, what do you think?
I don't know. I would like to think that there was something as advanced as that going on, because then I would think we'd know more probably than I unfortunately think we do. But I don't know if there is, and I know Lou Elizondo has at least kind of hinted at they do have ideas about ways to try to pull these things in, whether it be, and I'm assuming that some kind of technological or obviously nuclear or sound or frequency or something. I don't know. If it's something that we've been wrestling with for 70 years, we need to get the data available, put resources into this, and finally figure it out one way or the other, whatever.
Okay, so we know that the group around Kevin Day and those guys that are going to go out to Catalina Island and try to stir up some activity took out a transducer which played whale sounds coupled into the water. And when they played these whale sounds coupled into the water, and I think they had some pretty specific whale sounds like in distress, the UAPs came. the Tic Tacs came. And
this was during his service, or this was after?
No. This is after they formed the group. Okay. And this stuff got put up all over the, people just don't remember all the stuff that's out there. And I think that the Navy is also doing stuff that induces them to come up and react.
Okay. So they are doing that then. That's what you think is happening, Bob.
That's what I think. Again, I am not on the inside and haven't been for a year. But I didn't get involved in all this till very late in my career. And then I saw every picture we have seen in the last 6 months on the inside before I came outside. And there's more I saw inside that I think will come outside. But I'm not saying what it is because it hasn't been released. And I don't feel like going to prison just to make everybody happy. Okay, so, but when it comes out, I'm happy to give whatever I can say. But I will be, restricted to what has been released, and I can comment on it, but not give further information. There's a lot of stuff. Chris Mellon wrote this blog on the TTSA site, which I think is the only good thing that was ever written there, where he talks about all these unbelievable, incredible assets that the Pentagon and the intelligence community have for sensing things in, on, and around the Earth. And every single one of them has fast flyers coming in from out of Earth orbit into the Earth, and they're recording stuff. And he wants all those sensors fused so that we can get a good picture. So imagine we see a spacecraft enter really high speed and go down into the ocean. Well, then if we saw it coming, we could filter for what the underwater microphones hear when it splashes into the water and maybe figure out where it's going and what it's doing. If we don't fuse all those sensors, we will not get a good picture. And that's what Mellon wants done, because that's what he wrote in his blog, and he even named some of the systems.
Where do we go from here? Because we see that everything is really focused on the military. We're not hearing any about public sightings outside of the recent airliner where the pilot was over New Mexico. We don't hear anything from civilian pilots. It's all focused on the military right now. Tim, what's your thoughts on this being strictly focused on the military and not really talking about what's going on in the public?
Yeah, I mean, the attention is focused there in terms of media, but when you look at the actual numbers of sightings reported, I know Chris Rutowski had compiled the Canadian UFO survey, and their numbers for reports during the pandemic was up like a huge percentage. I can't recall what exactly it was, but so public numbers of sightings have increased over the past year by a large percentage. Of course, everybody's attention is, and it's maybe somewhat rightfully, how many more anecdotes or stories about sightings can we hear without getting disclosure or confirmation or whatever you want to call it, right? So I understandably, people have heard plenty of UFO stories. But when it starts to come from Navy, and people in the military and government, then the attention goes there. But yeah, there's still been more and more reports by private citizens too. So,
Bob, your thoughts?
I think that's as good an answer as I think we can do. I think it's right on the money.
Okay, so the fact that we are focusing on the military, and that's always a way to get taxpayer money. The funny part that we haven't heard recently, even with these new videos, is the word of threats. Are we still considering this a threat?
If it's over a naval vessel, the only assumption that you can make is it's a threat until you know it isn't. You go in assuming an unknown is a threat until you know it isn't. And it's just irresponsible to act over billions of dollars in assets and thousands of people's lives that something that shouldn't be there is a threat until you know it isn't. That's the only way. And any commander that doesn't act that way is guilty of dereliction of duty.
And from a scientific standpoint, Tim, what would the SCU say on that?
Well, again, to go back to our main thing is to get more data publicly available. Every time there's something that can't be figured out and it goes public, it seems like almost immediately somebody has claimed to have found the answer, right? I mean, I go back to the Roswell slides and the image of the mummy that was purported by various people to be an alien. And, within 15 minutes, literally, of that slide being released, the text had been deciphered and it was a displayed mummy of a child. It was, right? So you guys probably know that story, but there was months of that going on as a rumor and a story and innuendo. But then when the data actually comes out and people that know what they're doing can publicly access it, we can answer a lot of these questions that small working groups of one or two people in a military and some compartmentalized, they might not be able to do. So I think, letting declassifying data, the stuff with the SCU, we're requesting that as the Navy, I guess, said, none of the videos that were released revealed any sensitive methods or data, right? So if there is an additional video, at least, there shouldn't be anything else there that they could claim as a national security interest to not release it. So long story short, not expecting the government or the military to answer the questions for us, just maybe to give us a little help and let private citizens and the scientists try to figure it out.
Bob, go ahead. We got about 6.5 minutes left.
Look, what I want is free and open data. And what I want is enough data that we can, independent of the United States government or any government, or independent of any corporation, validate what they are telling us. If we can validate or invalidate what they're telling us, we put them in a box. We don't need to have as good a data as they do. What we need is good enough data that we can guarantee its provenance, guarantee the objectivity, to the point where they can't get away with lying to us. So they either are silent or they tell us the truth. Look, one of the single best instances of the government being caught out in a lie was that stupid effing story about balloons dropping mannequins over Roswell, when the reporters in the audience knew more than the stupid briefer. And they knew that when Roswell happened in 1947, that program was 7 years in the future, and they put a lie to it right there in the briefing room. That's how tight in a box I want them, with publicly available, objective, cannot be discounted data.
I don't think we're going to get it. Tim, do you?
I think we
No,
can.
I don't, unfortunately.
I think we can get it. But we got to do it ourselves.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Tim, you agree with Bob. How do we do it ourselves?
Just, again, if we can get data that's available and try to as scientists in the public realm, try to answer these questions. I think to a large degree, kind of assuming that somebody in power knows all the answers is maybe just a cop out on some, we really need to figure this out, and as a society, as a culture, and it's not just something we should expect.
My definition of victory is the National Science Foundation and the science labs for all the services release each $10 million for academics to do what they want to in this field. When that day happens, we have won.
Oh man!
I know that supposedly Harry Reid had tried years ago to put something like $10 billion into a long-term UFO research project that went nowhere, but something like that could theoretically happen in the future. So,
if it happens, we've won, because people just simply do not know how many academics would actually do the work, and they can't do it because they can't survive in a university without funding.
And that's what it all comes down to, is the funding. Gentlemen, we only have about 2.5 minutes left tonight. Bob, where do you want to take it?
Tim, why don't we talk about doing some interesting machine learning, data science, manipulation of some data sets to demonstrate to, say, people that have these data sets that we can do it. I think we want to talk about some project that SCU can support, where not just you and me, maybe we can kick it down the road, but in the entirety of SCU says, yeah, let's go do that. And bring along a few other people so that they can become full members of SCU. I mean, we need an actual data project in order to kick the can. We're not going to get the answer, but we can start the ball rolling down the hill and hope it turns into an avalanche.
Yeah, definitely, and I think that's a big part of it. Getting some of these data sets together so we can look at bigger picture questions, if there are patterns that might emerge, based on anything from geography to the type of person who has the encounter. But we need to, and we want to preserve those data sets too while they're still, Larry Hatch, for example, spent years on his old DOS database, and a lot of that's going to be lost if people don't actively have interest in trying to preserve it. So, well, I think that'd be a good project to try to stitch some of those data sets together. I
think that's great. Dave, do you have any questions from the forum?
Well, we got lots of questions, but not enough time. That's kind of where we are looking at this right now, and that's kind of difficult when a show like this flies by and we don't have enough time for a lot of the audience questions.
Well, I just think that the right solution is to bring Tim back again after we have a chance to think.
Well, I think so.
Sounds good to me, guys.
And I think the key coming out of this, gentlemen, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the key is more people in ufology got to figure out what the SCU is all about. All right, scientists, Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, because this is something where the real science is getting done on this subject. And I think for a long time, people have always said, where's the science? Where are the scientists involved in this? And the scientists have been quiet. Well, I don't think the scientists are being very quiet anymore, and I believe that's a very good thing for our field. Gentlemen, Bob, would you agree with that?
I do.
And Tim, how about for you?
I definitely do. And if you're interested in digging into that kind of data, come check out the online SCU conference. Come check it out.
That's the big thing right there. Gentlemen, I want to say thank you again for coming on with Science Bob and friends, Dr. Tim Brigham. You're a good dude, man. We got to do this again. Thank you so much for your time. Good. Science Bob, thank you for your wonderful time as well. We'll talk to you next month. Coming up next, we have the SOR Newswire. We have the Thought of the Day. Stay tuned. Spaced Out Radio continues right after this. Great job, gentlemen. Great job. Fantastic show. We could have taken this in way bunch more directions. Oh, Science Bob already signed out there, or what? Well, so did Tim Brigham. Cool. All right. Well, good night to them. Good night. Good night. Don't know where Science Bob went. Unless his computer was causing him problems again. Oh, you hung up on YouTube, or was it your computer again, Science Bob? Science Bob got aliens. Oh, you hung up quick. You don't normally hang up that quick. Well, if Bob was on the phone with us, we would talk about it. But not really going there right now. Not really going there right now. Good show. Yes, Melinda Leslie, Science Bob and I may have had an abduction. May. I got woken up. I knew something happened. I remember falling asleep, and I remember waking up or having a dream that night where there was a bunch of UFO people that were out there in this dark, dingy hotel, and there were 3 grays, 2 running in a pair, 1 running around on its own. I know Science Bob was there, and I woke up in the morning and felt like I hadn't slept a wink. My body was really sore. Actually, it was sore for a few days. So I called Science Bob on my way to work that morning. I asked him how did he sleep, and he said he was tossing and turning, that his wife Sharon had got up in the middle of the night because she had heard footsteps or something moving around in the house. And Bob, later on after our conversation, checked his Fitbit, which records when he's awake and when he's not. And there was 90 minutes in the middle of the night that Bob was apparently awake, and he has no recollection of it. Hey, Mandingo, how are you? All right. Thank you to everybody. Mr. Catfish, Rye, Fapster, Melinda, Science Bob, Cherry Pepsi Mike, the gorgeous Nicole, Tim, and Chris for the super chats tonight. Really do appreciate the love and support. Here we go with the news, everyone. We rounded third. We're heading for home tonight on Spaced Out Radio. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We really do appreciate earning your listening ears. We want to remind you that if you've missed most of this show or others, check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do old Davey the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. Speaking of the news, let's do this thing, shall we? The news is always changing, which is why we bring you the SOR Newswire at the back end of every show, where we get to the weird, the strange, the wacky, and sometimes the odd. Yeah, this one's pretty odd. New Jersey State Police were alerted to a UFO detector installed in the woods and dispatched a detective unit and a bomb-sniffing dog to the area. According to the police, the device was carefully disarmed by New Jersey State Park Police personnel by unplugging the headphone wire from the block of wood and the soup can it was plugged into. With UFO detector number 448 now out of service, we might not know when the aliens are going to arrive. All right, I don't know if you heard this or not, but the Pentagon has officially verified the night vision video circulating of unidentified triangular aerial aircraft swarming around the Navy's Arleigh Burke-class destroyer USS Russell in 2019. They are calling it real. Thank you to Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp for this one. Earlier this month, the Navy acknowledged that it was completely baffled by an incident in 2019 when a group of warships observed a cluster of strange craft, the likeliest explanation being drones, though they flew for far longer than any typical civilian units. The Navy said it had no firm theory as to who operated them. That's despite an extensive investigation that involved naval personnel ranging from onboard intelligence teams to senior officers, as well as civilian agencies like the FBI. The craft flew over in low-visibility conditions around warships involved in the exercise over the course of multiple nights, foiling any efforts by naval personnel to identify themselves. It is the latest in the series of bizarre incidents acknowledged by the Pentagon involving unidentified aerial phenomena that cross paths with the Navy sailors and pilots, including instances where elite fighter pilots taped objects that appeared to be maneuvering in ways impossible to achieve with unknown technology, while extraterrestrials or mysterious technologically advanced craft operated by the United States military or their foreign adversaries are exciting to speculate about. The explanation that requires the fewest leaps of logic is that nothing weird is going on. Skeptics believe videos released by the Navy actually depict mundane objects like planes and weather balloons, with their supposedly bizarre movements explained by various technical factors and limitations that the U.S. military won't ever publicly explain. Now, according to Mystery Wire, investigative filmmaker Jeremy Corbell, who wants to weaponize your curiosity, by the way, obtained the footage of the July 2019 incident that was collected by the Navy spearheaded UAP task force. The night vision video was presumably filmed by the ship's nautical or otherwise photographic interpretation and examination team, otherwise known as Snoopy, aboard the USS Russell. The team is comprised of intelligence personnel that document encounters with any and all surface or airborne contacts with the vessel. The video was taken on deployment from the USS Russell, Corbell said. It shows what they described as vehicles, and they made a great distinction. They made sure in this classified briefing that they made a great distraction and distinction that this is not something that we own, either a black project. This is not something of a foreign military, that these were behaving in ways that we did not expect. And they were, shaped like non-aerodynamically, like pyramids, flying pyramids. Interesting. Up here in Canada, we like to keep things interesting with our politics. Namely, this guy in Quebec. A Liberal MP was caught wearing his birthday suit in the virtual House of Commons. William Amos, who represented the Quebec riding of Pontiac since 2015, appeared on the screens of his fellow members of Parliament completely nude. Yes, a screenshot obtained by the Canadian press shows him standing between the Quebec and Canadian flags, his private parts hidden in what appears to be his office. Bloc Québécois MP Claude Delafay, the party whip, raised the incident in a point of order after question period, suggesting that parliamentary decorum requires male MPs to wear a jacket and a tie and a shirt, underwear, and trousers. Amos did not speak during question period on Wednesday and therefore did not show up on the main screen. Speaker Anthony Rota later thanked de Belfay, for her observations and clarified that while he had not seen anything, he checked with technicians and confirmed they saw something. Only people connected to the platform were able to see the interactions of other members during the question period in virtual mode. Amos, a backbench MP, did not speak about this, and he apologized on a tweet. I made a really unfortunate mistake today, and obviously I'm embarrassed by it. My camera was accidentally left on as I changed into work clothes after going for a jog. I sincerely apologize to all my colleagues in the House. It was an honest mistake, and it won't happen again. Big deal. He's working from home. Let him be in his skivvies. Who cares? A 100-year-old Japanese clock that stopped working after the 2011 earthquake has started ticking again after another quake struck this year. The clock, stored in a Buddhist temple, was submerged by the tsunami on Japan's northeastern coast that followed the devastating earthquake, which killed more than 18,000 people in March 2011. Its owner, Bunshun Sakano, then tried to fix the clock without success. But when a smaller quake hit 10 years later, it just began working again. Now, according to the Meiji Shimbun, the spring-driven clock was stored in the Fumonji Temple in Yamamoto, in Japan's Miyagi region. Miyagi and neighboring Fukushima were badly hit by the 2011 earthquake and tsunami. On March 11th, 2011, the temple, which stands a few hundred meters from the coast, was struck by the tsunami waves, with only its pillars and roof spared by the deluge. After the disaster, Mr. Sakano, the temple's head priest, rescued the clock from the debris. He rewound it, but could not get it to start. Then on February 13th of this year, weeks from the anniversary of the disaster, the same region was struck by another powerful earthquake. Meteorologists said they believed it was an aftershock 10 years later. The following morning, Mr. Sakano, while checking the main hall for any damage, heard a ticking sound that sounded awfully familiar. Found the clock was moving again. 2 months later, it's still working. How awesome is that? A representative of Seiko, the clock's manufacturer, told the Mainichi newspaper it's possible that the pendulum, which had stopped, started moving again with the shaking of the earthquake, or that dust had built up inside and came loose. Mr. Sakano, whose temple served as base for volunteers after the quake, said he has taken inspiration from the clock restarting. Maybe it's pushing me to move forward with new determination, the 58-year-old said. It's like a sign of encouragement that the real restoration is yet to come. I love stories like that. I really do. I think it's awesome. Now, if you're in Australia, because everything weird, strange, gross happens in Australia and Florida, but we're talking Australia here, be careful what you buy in your produce. Here's why. A Sydney couple received a fright of a lifetime when they discovered a rare venomous snake in a bag of supermarket lettuce, but recovered and later used the fresh produce in a salad wrap. Ew. Like this thing probably dropped a deuce and peed on this. The juvenile pale-headed snake was tucked into a 2-pack of cause lettuce, which Alexander White and his partner Emily purchased from an Aldi supermarket in Sydney. It was moving around and flickering its tongue. White said, it was actually its tongue which let me know it wasn't a giant worm. I would have been more comfortable with a worm, to be honest. The reptile, about 20 centimeters long, appeared to have been sleeping peacefully in the lettuce in the supermarket's refrigerated section of the grocery cabinet until White picked it up, carried it around the store, then jostled it in his backpack for the 10-minute cycle home. We didn't have a trolley because neither of us had a dollar coin, so we were just carrying it. In retrospect, kind of freaks me out, he says. It should. The snake emerged as they were unpacking their groceries at home. They called wildlife rescue organization Wires and were advised the snake was probably a baby eastern brown, one of the most venomous and aggressive species of snake in the country. But after extensive amounts of snake photography, it was identified as a pale-headed snake, a species that a snake expert told the couple was medically significant. I thought that it meant that it had medicinal properties, said White. Apparently it means that if you are bitten, you have to go to the hospital pretty quickly. They bite repeatedly when provoked. According to the Australian Museum, pale-headed snakes are a shy but nervous species, easily agitated if cornered. There have been no recorded fatalities, but the museum states, it could produce some unpleasant symptoms, including severe headaches, blurred vision, localized pain, and abnormal bleeding. While White says the juvenile snake was quite cute, he and Neat spent some time videoing it and conducting video calls between the snake and their children who were away for school holidays while awaiting expert assistance. They also checked the rest of their grocery bags for errant wildlife after realizing the lettuce bag was open at one end. I had a moment where I thought, what if the snake has come from someplace else? So I kind of rustled through everything to find evidence of other snakes, but thankfully there was no other snakes around. Whew. I'm not grocery shopping there. No way. No way. All right, Americans, be careful here. In what may be a first-of-its-kind operation, the FBI recently accessed private servers across the U.S., ostensibly to delete malware that had previously been installed by foreign hackers. The FBI targeted this unique digital cleanup at servers running the vulnerability-ridden email product Microsoft Exchange. The U.S. Justice Department said that the purpose of the Bureau's operation was to digitally erase traces of web shells had they remained. Could have been used to maintain and escalate persistent, unauthorized access to U.S. networks. The security flaws plaguing Microsoft products are well known, and we've covered them quite extensively. Since the company's disclosures about Exchange's vulnerabilities in early March, hackers have swarmed, exposing servers all over the world to pilfer data and conduct ransomware attacks. Out of all the groups involved, the Chinese-based group called Hafnium seems to have concerned American authorities the most. The group, which has used web skills and shells as backdoors into U.S. networks, is said to have aggressively targeted Exchange for email theft and data exfiltration. A federal affidavit, unsealed, strongly implies that the goal of the FBI's operation was to remove malware specifically deployed by Hafnium. While the Justice Department doesn't explicitly name Hafnium, it is only a threat actor explicitly mentioned in the FBI affidavit because, we don't want to piss them off. This may be the first time that the FBI has conducted an operation like this, according to TechCrunch. For years, the Bureau has sought greater powers and authority when it comes to conducting digital investigations inside the United States, though critics and civil liberties defenders have consistently fought against such encroachments into private sectors. Got a dog? Does he like beer? The makers of Busch Beer announced they are seeking a very good boy or girl to make $20,000 by serving as chief tasting officer for Dog Brew, a beer made for dogs. Anheuser-Busch says its inaugural batch of Dog Brew, an alcohol-free beer, actually made from bone broth, sold out within 24 hours last year, and it is now looking for a canine chief tasting officer to help expand the line of offerings. The dog will be paid $20,000 for its role and will be responsible for taste testing, quality control, and fulfilling duties as an ambassador for the product. The dog will also become a featured creator for Busch's social media channels. I guess, what was the bud name? The Spuds McKenzie? Is that it? Spuds McKenzie? Yeah, I guess she's right retired, so they can't bring her back. The reaction from Busch's Dog Brew, released last year, was so overwhelmingly positive that we knew we had a big challenge in year 2 to keep the momentum going. So to expand the brand this year, we needed a true expert in the space on our team, said Daniel Blake, Vice President of Value Brands at Anheuser-Busch. We're excited to give one qualified canine a real paying job and to tap into their insider knowledge of our target consumer to expand Busch Dog Brew in 2021. Owners interested in getting their pets considered for the position by posting photos of their dogs on social media, along with a description of their qualifications and the hashtag BuschCTO contest. My dog, he'd like anything. He wouldn't make a good one. No, because he scarfs down everything. He doesn't even taste anything. It's all good to him. A California-based restaurant chain is offering customers free burgers for a year if they get hamburger tattoos bearing the eatery's name. Farmer Boys announced it partnered with the Honorable Society Tattoo Shop in West Hollywood, California, and Rockin' Ink Tattoo in Las Vegas to offer 3 different 2-inch by 2-inch tattoo designs. Customers who receive the tattoos will receive free burgers for a year from Farmer Boys locations. Farmer Boys said the promotion celebrates the chain's 40th anniversary. Customers can sign up for tattoo appointments on the restaurant's website. I'm good for that. I do that. And finally, you know I love beautiful hair. Well, an Indian woman who set the Guinness World Record for the longest hair on a teenager received her first haircut since age 6 and donated the cut hair for display at Ripley's Believe It or Not Museum. 18-year-old Nilanshi Patel of Madasa, Gujarat, first set the Guinness record for longest hair on a teenager when she was 16, with her hair measuring 5 feet 7 inches long. Patel's hair was measured just days before her 18th birthday, and she broke her own record for a second time with hair measuring 6 feet 6.7 inches long. My hair gave me a lot. Because of my hair, I am known as the real-life Rapunzel. Now it's time to give back, Patel said. Patel said she had considered donating her hair to make wigs for children with cancer, but her mother convinced her that she should go on display to inspire others. Her mother said she would donate her own hair to cancer for the wig program if her daughter donated it for the museum display. Patel's hair is now being prepared for display at Ripley's Believe It or Not Museum in Los Angeles and will later be transferred to the Guinness World Records Hollywood Museum in Los Angeles as well. Good for her. Beautiful hair. Thought of the Day happens every night at this time, where we ask a question on our Facebook and Twitter pages, then read your responses on the air because we love the audience participation around here. Today's Thought of the Day is as follows. When it comes to UFOs, after years of cover-ups, why now the push for disclosure? Start off with Eric Mitchell, who will be a guest on this show next month. Disclosure is very useful to people in positions of power. Neil, for a level playing field with the spooks. Bob, because the COVID vaccine is the cover they need to inoculate us against the soon-to-be-revealed aliens and their accompanying viruses. Oh, that's actually a good call there, Bob. Good call. Sparkles. I think it is so interesting that when Trump signed the $2.3 trillion coronavirus relief and government funding bill in December, the 180-day countdown for U.S. intelligence agencies to tell Congress what they know about UFOs began. An article said it is a stipulation that was tucked into the committee comment section of the Intelligence Authorization Act for the fiscal year 2021. So if we look around at what's going on with coronavirus, it has become a tool to create fear. It is working well. Possibly disclosure, according to the aliens, was included at this time again, created more worldwide fear. We'll never know. We never will know. Barry, my guess is that if there is disclosure, it will be just another push of disinformation. Jeremy, good question, Dave. I think once the commercialization of space is underway, there's no hiding it, so there's trying to soft disclose now to prepare the public for what's been happening for years. Eric with a K, we are his 4th favorite show in the world, people. We're number 4. Eric says, when real disclosure happens, the world as we know it will now be controlled by non-human forces, and the people will be helpless to do a damn thing about it. William, what Eric Mitchell said, I strongly question the reasoning behind the disclosure, and more importantly, the long-term agenda behind said disclosure. David, too many people are seeing that they cannot get no longer ignored. Also, when more and more people see the exact same thing at the exact same time, it's kind of hard to hide it from everyone. Andy, disclosure, interesting, word by itself. Facial disclosure, I think we already have that. The government says the 3 videos are videos that are real, but they do not know what they are. Full disclosure, I do not think will ever happen. Gail, a 65-year end date for the Greada Treaty would coincide nicely with all increased UFO sightings and government knowledge meant of the phenomena. Acknowledgement. She decided to hyphenate that. Poor spelling there, Captain. Acknowledgement is one word of the phenomena, which is leading to disclosure. Carrie gets the final word because they could sneak it into the media with all the chaos going on. Thank you to everybody playing along in the Thought of the Day. We'll do it all again tomorrow. Thank you to Captain Shirk for the news, Science Bob and Dr. Timothy Brigham for Science Bob and Friends. We got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot Thal rocking in the background with Little Brother is Watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in and out of every single show. Get your horns up from the guitar god himself, Special thanks to everybody listening in at home, at work, in your cars, wherever you may be. Thank you to everyone hanging out in our chat rooms tonight on YouTube, LGAB, Spreaker, Revolution Radio, Facebook, and Derek and the Snarkettes on Twitter. Remember, this show is copyright by Spaced Out Radio and SOR Media Ventures Limited. Thank you so much for choosing to share your evening with us, because together, my friends, we own the night. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home. Yes, the Woo train has docked for the night. But tomorrow, my friends, we shall ride again. Your seats are always available. Your tickets never expire. And if you want to bring a friend, we've got room for them too. Good night.